Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and this week we are taking a close look at Thames Water's proposed White Horse Reservoir in Oxfordshire, one of 9 new storage schemes advancing under Ofwat's PR24 plans to confront growing climate pressures, population growth, and the urgent need for long-term water security. The investment is much needed. No new reservoirs have been built in the UK for more than 30 years, leaving a potential shortfall of up to 5 billion litres a day in England by 2055, according to Ofwat's recent reporting. And as if to highlight the challenge right now, Thames Water has this week announced a new hosepipe ban across the region. Clearly, work needs to happen to reduce leakage, but without new storage capacity, we're heading for problems. Well, my guest today is Nevil Muncaster, Strategic Water Resources Director of Thames Water, and the man masterminding plans to tackle this challenge, including, of course, the £7.5 billion mega project to build a 12 square kilometre reservoir near Abingdon. This facility is designed to hold 150 billion litres of water to bolster supplies and secure drought resilience for up to 15 million people across London and the South East for the next century. Supporters call it a critical, non-negotiable insurance policy against changing climate and a rapidly growing population. However, local communities, environmental charities and councils have raised fierce objections over its massive ecological footprint, carbon costs and the disruption of local livelihoods. Add to that, of course, the multi-billion pound pressure that the investment will add to Thames Water's already precarious financial position, which see the company currently saddled with nearly 20 billion of debt and racing against a looming autumn cash flow crisis. So much to talk about as we explore progress towards the development consent order application for the project this year. Let's find out a bit more. Nevil, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, let's start, Nevil, with the why. This reservoir near Abingdon has been talked about for decades. Certainly Ofwat has underlined support for the investment. You have a hosepipe ban in place, so I get why now is the moment it must be delivered. But why is now the moment that it can be delivered?
I think there are a number of parts here, aren't there? Certainly, yes, we have seen a change in weather. Climate change is definitely upon us. As you said, we announced yesterday a hosepipe ban for the whole region. But what we are seeing are trends in weather that show we're having longer, drier, warmer, hotter summers and wet winters.
Yeah.
And that means that actually we need more resilience during the summer to sustain supplies and keep people with water and to protect the environment, of course.
Yeah.
And just going into some of the facts behind that is quite interesting in itself. You know, we're seeing on average around a 10% increase in demand throughout the patch. It's equivalent to a city the size of Manchester being sort of attached to our network. That's big.
And that's because of population growth, or is it because people are just using
more water? And I think, you know, that's the important piece. What we're seeing is we always see through our smart meter program that when temperatures go above 25 degrees, people use around 25% more water.
Right.
In the recent heat waves, where temperatures have gone into the 30s, we're seeing people using 50% more water.
Wow, and that's a significant
and that's
impact.
A really stretch on the system itself, but also, of course, draws down on those resources. Yeah. I think tied with that, we're also seeing trends in the river itself. You know, we rely heavily on the River Thames for drawing water for London in particular, but also for the Thames Valley. And what we're seeing is that in these extended periods, groundwater falls, which provide the base flow for the Thames River falls in level, and we can abstract less.
Yeah.
So all that ties together. There's a need.
So that absolute increasing need makes that ability for you to deliver this that much more important, but also that much more possible.
Yes, that's right. And I think also bear in mind this is now a regional scheme. So it's not a Thames Water scheme. This is providing support for 15 million customers, not just of Thames, but also Southern Water and Affinity Water. And it's something which is, we like to think of it as a header tank for the South East, if you like. So it will support local people, but also supports then others.
Well, let's talk about, I quoted it as a £7.5 billion, 12 square kilometre project. I mean, briefly, set the scene for us. You know, how do you describe the White Horse Reservoir project?
So the reservoir itself is what it says in the tin. It's a sort of a bankside storage. We take water out of the river in the winter, hold it, put it back in when we need it in terms of drought, or provide it to, say, Southern Water through a new pipeline that they are installing themselves over the next 15 years. So that's its core purpose. But actually, this reservoir sits in the heart of Oxfordshire. It's something where we are looking very much at how it fits within the community, a space for people and nature together. And those things are really key to making sure that this is not just a water resource, it's also a community asset that can be used and sit there, provide jobs and provide growth for the economy.
Right. Of course, we have a new government, a new Prime Minister this week, and so I suppose we better tackle perhaps the elephant in the room, which is renationalisation. We are hearing a lot about plans by Thames Water lenders to stave off any potential renationalisation threat by Andy Burnham's new government by offering the government a golden share in the company and giving, critically, giving local government and local authorities a greater oversight of your operations. I mean, how do you see this whole backdrop impacting your investment plans at White Horse and elsewhere?
So a couple of things. Let's unpick that, shall we? So firstly, Thames Water provides an essential service that continues. Every day, 8,500 people come to work to provide that service, and regardless of who owns Thames Water, that continues. We are all absolutely committed to doing that job. The reservoir actually is part of that essential service. We need this because we need to make sure that we don't run out of water, that people always have water in their taps, and that's for a regional asset. It has strong support from government. As you know, Secretary of State signed off our WRMP in 2024, and government has got right behind this and really supporting us in terms of making sure this scheme becomes a reality. So I think regardless of ownership model, the scheme continues. We will work on it and do our job.
So all that discussion can go on in the background. You right now are focused on this because this is the critical asset that needs to be there to make sure that your 16 million customers and the rest in the southeast have the water resources that are required.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, remember that this is going to be delivered through a SIPA approach. Therefore, there will be a new licence entity that will own and construct the reservoir, not Thames Water.
Yeah, we'll talk about that SIPA model a bit later on. But I mean, the reality is, as we said, there's now this huge need for investment. As a water company with the most customers in England, you project a shortfall. I think that's up to something like 1 billion litres a day by 2015, which is a mind-boggling number, to be quite honest. I mean, Ofwat talked about a twin-track approach, though, in their recent documents. That's, yes, building more resources, but it's also tackling leakage. Why is spending £7.5 billion on a massive new reservoir now the solution instead of fixing those notoriously leaky network pipes?
So in simple terms, it's not one or the other, it's both.
Right.
And you'll have seen from our plans probably that 80% of that shortfall is going to be met through demand management. So halving leakage and reducing demand. But there's still a gap, and that gap is to be filled by the reservoir and in fact other schemes as well as they go through. So those targets on demand are extremely challenging, but we are committed to making sure that we fix leaks. We've recently been talking about our big investment programme, biggest investment for over 150 years, our infrastructure. That's on track, £20 billion we're investing in our assets in this 5-year period. We have already reduced leakage by 14% since the beginning of this period. And so therefore those commitments go on. To make sure that not just only day to day are we fixing leaks, and we're currently fixing, I think, 750 a week. So it's it's a large number of leaks going on, but at the same time we're replacing the mains. We've replaced 100 kilometres of water main in the last year, and those programmes continue, and in fact will grow as we go forward.
And I imagine similarly for issues such as pollution and sewage spills. I mean, you've just obviously opened the Tideway project, which is a massive benefit on that front. But there's a whole rake of other work which will continue as well.
Absolutely, yes. So strengthening our network, investing in all our sewage treatment plants across the patch to ensure that we just reduce pollution and maintain sort of our protection of the environment.
You've also changed the name. It used to be called the South East Strategic Reservoir Option, which was not quite as snappy as White Horse Reservoir, I suppose. But I mean, aside from the cosmetic changes to route the project to the local heritages of the area, I mean, are there some concrete design or philosophical changes that you've made that prompted that change of name?
So The design has developed continually since we really got going on it 4 or 5 years ago, when it was still then a water resource project. Now it's an infrastructure project. Right. So it is shifted. The name is actually really important because, as you say, it embeds it in the community, who we have been talking to a lot about the scheme, what it means for them, how we can make sure that we take upon the local views and make sure it really becomes part of the community. A lot of the work we're doing is around sort of the nature-based solutions around there, whether that's providing wetlands around the perimeter where we divert streams and rivers, but make sure we really encourage wildlife into the region and into the area.
Yeah, well, I'm intrigued because the reservoir relies, as you say, on pumping water from the Thames during the winter when flows are high. So it begs the question, Neville, if climate change makes winter rainfall that much more volatile and unpredictable. I mean, what happens in the southeast supplies if we don't get enough water in the winter?
So you'll expect us to have done all the modelling that shows.
Yeah, I would have done. Yes, yeah.
So there is water in the river and there is sufficient there. And actually, we've been quite conservative in terms of assuming that it's going to take 2 seasons to fill. We think actually in a wet winter, we'll be able to fill it in 1 season. So all those models are there. We're working very hard to make sure that the reservoir is sized, the pipes, the infrastructure are sized to accommodate all the flows we need and make sure that it's resilient for the long term.
Right, so no fears that it will just run dry.
No fears, no.
Okay, well, your timeline is ambitious. I mean, starting with a DCO application this year, start of main construction works in 2032. What are the milestones that you have in your mind for keeping that on track then?
So you're right, it's ambitious. There's a lot to do, but we've been working towards submitting our DCO planning application this year, and that's on track. And that's a huge milestone in itself because of the work that goes into producing the sort of the thousands of documents that have to go alongside that and justify it and demonstrate sort of the approach we're taking. But alongside that, we're also now tendering for the main works contract. And that's really important for a number of reasons. One, it brings on the main works contractor earlier, which means we can use them for some of the early design work, and it involved an understanding of what we can do, which we think will help with programme, will help with costs as well, and understanding the work that needs to be done. And at the same time also, we're setting ourselves up for going to market for the infrastructure provider itself. So bringing on the investments that will then make sure this all happens. So as we go through DCO and get that granted, we expect to go similarly a twin track approach on the infrastructure provider, such that we are able then to reach financial close in 28 and start this work venture properly in 29.
Yeah. I mean, the project's overseen by the RAPID programme, the Regulators Alliance for Progressing Infrastructure Development under Ofwat's new major water infrastructure programme. It's a strict gated process. I mean, what specific performance metrics or environmental benchmarks must Thames Water hit to pass those kind of upcoming regulatory gates and unlock the next phase of funding?
So we've just gone through sort of the gate 3. That's very much around sort of preparing for the DCO, all the environmental targets that we have to get and meet. And we sort of come back and now on things like BNG, what our targets are there for achieving the 10% target that we've got. Gate 4, which then comes post DCO submission, will be very much around sort of much more around the commercialities of the project itself and ensuring that it's deliverable, the economics are right, and allowing us then to get permission, if you like, to go out and set up the IP, which then Ofwat will then start regulating separately.
My conversation with Chris Taylor-Dawson at Ofwat recently, is it 6 different gates that you've got to jump through? And each one of those just reassures Ofwat that you are on track to deliver this effectively.
Absolutely. And of course, with White Horse, it's unique in a way because we've got 2 other partners we're bringing alongside co-sponsors. So Affinity Water and Southern Water, and they too are alongside this to make sure this is developed for their needs too.
Well, how do those 3 companies, how do you divide the operational responsibilities and long-term maintenance costs between all those 3 companies under your AMP8 framework?
So we're going through various phases. At the moment, we're in that development stage. So Thames Water is the lead developer, so is responsible basically for putting it all together. But we work in partnership, essentially, with Affinity and Southern to ensure the design meets all our needs, the programme is met, and we co-fund and co-share those development costs between us. As we move then into operation, if you like, later on, Thames will be the system operator, so it will operate the water supplies and have bulk supply agreements with Severn and Affinity, who we will then bill for the water, and those bills will include the cost of operation of the reservoir and transfer of water.
Any ideas how much this project might add to individual bills?
Currently we're talking, and this is in 22-23 prices, around £5 a month is what we've got. But of course that's subject to many things. It's subject to the DCO, subject to the final design, and subject to the infrastructure provider and the investor's bid for WACC.
Yeah, I mean, you plan, let's talk about how the investment will be paid for. I mean, you plan, as I understand it, to follow lessons from Tideway and deliver, as you said earlier, using the Specified Infrastructure Projects Regulations, SIPA model. Appointing an independent infrastructure provider to build it out. Why is this model the best fit for a reservoir, and how will you prevent the kind of cost escalations that many other infrastructure projects that we see around us suffer from?
Right, so there are a couple of things in there in terms of the cost of the SIPA itself and why do SIPA, and then the cost of the project. Okay. So SIPA is fairly unique. It was used for Tideway, has worked extremely well. Tideway has now delivered on time, on budget, and I think is seen rightly as a success. This is very similar. Firstly, what it does is it means that Thames, which would normally be the incumbent and would deliver this scheme, isn't doing that. It means that then, sort of from a financial point of view, those pressures are taken off. And whilst Thames customers contribute to that through their bills, the actual work is done by a specialist sort of purpose company and licensed entity that delivers the reservoir. So you get a specialist delivering what you need.
In Tideway's case, that was the Bazalgette company.
That's right. Bazalgette Tunnel Limited delivered. And they call themselves Tideway, obviously, but that was the model, and that's what we've done. And they have a relationship with Thames Water in that instance, as will the IP for the reservoir. So
you'll be sort of following that model, setting up a separate delivery company, infrastructure provider to build it out.
That's right.
When does that start happening then?
So they will. We expect financial close in 2029, and then we will then move into construction thereafter. There may be some enabling works that either Thames will do or the IP will do, depending on timing. But then from that point on, they are paid and funded through the SIPA model by the three water companies and their customers.
But as in any project, Neville, keeping that, and that's the same thing that Tideway had to face, keeping that project on cost and on-time budgets is critical. So how do you plan to do that with a project as complicated as White Horse?
So and hence the reason we're doing all the work we are now to setting it up. It's important for us that we make this as sort of as with the appropriate risk profile for a project of this size. I won't say risk-free. It's still a major construction and infrastructure project, but we're doing an awful lot of the design work now. We're doing a lot of the ground investigation, all the analysis that we need to do locally to really set this project up well from the start and to give us confidence that the envelope we currently have provided is appropriate for the size of the project, and we can keep moving on that basis.
I mean, are there specific project lessons that you can take from Tideway? I mean, other than getting Andy Mitchell on board to come and run it for you, maybe. No, but I suppose one of the things that they did do, from my perspective, the way I looked at it, was they did create a really good local story around that relationship with the River Thames that London has had. Are those the kind of lessons that you'll be looking to replicate?
Yeah, there are a number. I mean, if talk to Andy, he'll also say the way the project was set up from the start was excellent, gave him the flexibility he needed to run that scheme, that project well. As you say, they then in turn took very much around what was the Tideway approach essentially to what would good look like from both a safety point of view, the relationship with the river, both in terms of safety and operation, transport, keeping materials and trucks off the roads. All those things fit, and those things actually resonate very well with what we're doing with the reservoir. We're bringing a new railway siding alongside to bring materials in and out mostly, so we don't clog up the local roads. And we have a good relationship then with the local communities as we improve the infrastructure immediately around the reservoir.
Well, given the high current interest rate environment and the negative press surrounding UK water sector, I mean, how confident are you that some kind of special purpose vehicle can attract that low cost private equity to finance the reservoir without driving up customer bills even further beyond that £5 a month?
So look, it's fair to say that the circumstances around when Tideway was let are different now. as you've said, alluded to, interest rates are much higher. It'll no doubt be a different cost of capital that comes through, but it will still be competitive. And our objective is to make sure that it's as low as we can get, and it is a reasonable risk transfer between the three companies and IP.
Yeah, I mean, you're managing this massive tender right now, £5.7 billion tender for construction, while simultaneously preparing the DCO. New secretaries of state arrive and different demands happen. What happens if the secretary of state does reject the DCO? What are the kind of financial liabilities that you have here you have to face regarding those early commercial tenders?
Look, we're funded currently for the development of the project, and that's it. But what we're doing all the way through that is making sure the alignment with our regulators, alignment with government is close, and everyone is deeply involved in this project as it goes, is aware of what we're doing, and is familiar with the risks that we're talking about, how we're managing those, the costs, and therefore there are no surprises. And that's where we want to make sure we get through DCO, everyone's bought in, committed, and we move forward.
Yeah, because I suppose going back to the as we mentioned, the issues around the wider company. Thames's chief exec Chris Weston stated the company only has cash to survive until November 2026, which is exactly when you plan to publish the DCO application. I mean, if Thames Water does run out of money this autumn, who takes ownership of the project? How do you keep this 2026 to 43 timeline on track and not collapsing?
So look, that's not a scenario we need to contemplate. We've already said that whoever owns Thames Water, funds Thames Water, work continues as normal. So that will continue. We'll go through the DCO, and then we will continue to develop this scheme and deliver it.
Yeah, so there's no risk you're going to be sort of chopped off at the kneecaps then?
We don't see one, no.
Okay. We touched on the impact of the new government and the creditors' rescue plan. But if the creditors' plan, a rescue plan, is accepted, I mean, how likely is it that the terms will restrict perhaps the capital available for some of the non-core reservoir features? If money is tight, are there things that you are kind of under pressure to chop off? Maybe it's around the environmental issues or the local amenities, etc.
So I think go back to basics of what we're doing here. Thames will be funding with its co-sponsors the development of the scheme, but actually delivery and the funding and financing of the construction and the scheme itself is done through the IP. Yeah. So it won't be an impact on Thames Water. This is something that comes through.
So that's their decision to manage the progress of the project and hitting their budgets and timescales.
Absolutely, and that will be all done in accordance with the DCO and the requirements under the DCO.
Yeah, fascinating set of challenges. Let's talk a bit about you, Nevil, because you've been at Thames for 5 years, and before that you were with Yorkshire Water for 8 years and Veolia before that. I mean, you are a career waterman, I suppose you could say. The sector has its critics. I mean, how would you describe the changes that you've seen over your career in terms of delivering for customers? Because it's a difficult but vital part of the nation's makeup. It's a critical asset. But how's it changed for you?
I think talk about what hasn't changed first of all, which is actually the commitment of the people in the industry, and that's what draws most of us in. We love working we love what we do. We love working with each other and the people who are in the industry because everyone is so committed. Yeah, and yes, there is a lot of noise at the moment, and there is a lot of change that's required, but mostly that's around increasing investment. We're going from an efficient model to a resilient model in water, and that is actually something that we welcome as well because we want to see that shift. But the people are brilliant. I love the work we do. It's very diverse. I've been very lucky in my career to have lots of opportunities. But actually what's quite interesting is I started with a small engineering consultant that's specialist in reservoirs. And now I'm back on sort of towards the latter end of my career, building reservoirs. So all those things for me resonate very well with what I do.
And it is, I'm sure you're probably going to say no, but the criticism, is it fair? Do people, I suppose I always ask this of water people, do people value water highly enough?
So I always worry the cost of water is too low. That won't go down well in some quarters, but actually, we have to invest to make sure that it's resilient and that has a cost. So it's really important that we understand that, and it's about the supply itself, but also our impact on the environment is key. Whether that be what we take from the environment to put into our taps or what we put back. when we discharge as well, and making sure that whole cycle is right. And it's complex. Yeah? It's not easy. I mean, as an engineer, I used to say, water's easy, a cubic metre weighs a tonne, that will never change, you can't innovate around that, and it always flows downhill.
Yeah.
But actually, it is more complex than that. And if you look at where we take our water from, whether it be sort of the groundwater or the rivers, it's a changing environment continually, and rightly so. We are having to protect the environment itself further now, and that's really important. But that does mean there's less water to come out of the environment and feed taps. So we need to look at other sources. Because
there's a lot more pressures on that when it comes to, farmers are now requiring a lot more abstraction because the rivers are running low. And as you say, climate change, hotter weather means people just use more of it. Yet the price of water coming out of your tap and being taken away in your sewers, if you compare it to a bottle of water you buy in a supermarket, it's very, very low. Do you see that changing in any time?
I think we have to be realistic in terms of what people can afford and what we need to spend and how we need to fund that. So I think there is always going to be a balance there. In terms of our impact and protection for the environment is absolutely critical in everything we do, but that has a cost too. So I think understanding how these things add up and how we pay for them in the future is going to be vital.
Yeah.
And then how we trade them off against other priorities, whether it be healthcare, transport, helping people is key, isn't it?
Well, we mentioned the tideway making the connection to the River Thames for local people. That connection with local people, I suppose, is vital for someone like Thames. And while you were at Yorkshire Water, you were on the Sustainable Economy and Culture Board at Leeds City Council and the West Yorkshire Local Nature Partnership, all of which are kind of trying to bring in the local community. Why is that so important then to you?
So. When I was at Yorkshire, we did a lot of work in partnership, and I'm very proud of some of the work we did there. And yes, you talk about Leeds and the Yorkshire partnerships. We also actually established the Living with Water partnership in Hull, which was very much looking at how all the local authorities, the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water in that case, manage water to reduce flood risk. And basically because Hull was in a bowl and everything ended up in our system. And what we found is by working together, we basically were able to prioritise schemes better, and actually we got more efficient in the way we delivered and much more coordinated. The most important thing is it builds trust because everyone's working together on common goals, and that is key for partnership.
And has that changed in your career? This critical need to engage closely with the communities in a really deep and strong way?
I think certainly we've come back and we're much closer again, and everyone sees how important it is to work together. And if I look at some of the work we're doing now in London on flooding and sort of the mayor's objectives for sort of green, healthy streets, actually what you see is the greening of London, which the mayor is pushing forward, very much fits with our ability to control water, and therefore we can get the same benefits from the same purpose.
Yeah, perhaps a controversial question, Neville. Do you see renationalisation of the water sector as being critical for the industry to improve services and reduce costs, or is it a bit of a red herring for you?
But I don't think the ownership model actually impacts that. And if you look at sort of what comes out of the Water Industry Review recently, the call for regional planning absolutely is vital, whether that be in water and waste. We need to focus very hard on that and make sure that we join up in whatever model we run under.
This is the kind of Lift report. It wasn't an issue that was raised. It wasn't even on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely.
You studied in Plymouth. You worked in Yorkshire, but you're now based in London. Well, where is home for you nowadays?
So look, I was brought up in the southeast. I've worked and lived overseas. Well, I lived in Cyprus building a dam. I've lived in India. So home for me is where the family are. And friends, and that works.
Yeah. Do you give feedback as a customer to your own water supplier?
Yes, quite often feedback to Thames. but people are used very much, aren't they, sort of to generally the water supply, turn the tap on and water is always there. I flush the toilet and it goes away. And in a way, that works really well. But I think what people miss then is the work that goes on in between to make sure that works really well. Those are the messages we need to get out.
What do you do, Neville, where you're not thinking about reservoirs?
A whole mixture. There's sort of a lot of it family focused and sort of spending time. But
have you got a big family?
Three young lads, sort of growing fast. But also we enjoy London life. sort of whether it be theatre or concerts. That goes on well, and occasionally, if I get the chance, I'll sit down and write as well. So there's sort of lots going on.
Very good, very good. Well, let's go back to the project. I mean, I'm bringing perhaps those local communities on board, which I think is kind of a priority for you right now as you're progressing the project. Thames learned at Tideway about the critical need to work with the community, and when designing and constructing this kind of projects. I mean, those lessons for you, do they remain upper in your mind right now?
Always. I mean, a reservoir is a community asset, absolutely. And whilst it is a southeast asset as well in this instance, very much integrated into sort of all water supplies, it's important for us that we connect with the community, we hear what the community asks for, and we're seen there to be present. I remember when we initially started this project and I went to a sort of a public hearing, we were not popular because we weren't recognised. People didn't understand what we were trying to do. They felt that they hadn't got enough information, and they were generally deeply worried. From that point on, we've built the team now because we've moved into it more of an infrastructure project. We've built relations. There will always be detractors, and that's right. It's a democracy after all, and we need to listen to what people have to say. Yeah. But I think there's a lot more people also now who welcome the scheme and are looking forward to it becoming forward.
Yeah. Well, the High Court dismissed the judicial review brought by the CPRE Oxfordshire and Safer Waters. But this challenge does kind of highlight this deep local anger that is probably there, not necessarily amongst all people, but by some parts of the community. It's obviously more evident in terms of a project than Tideway because just by nature of the fact it's not underground. But I mean, how do you respond to residents who feel the reservoir will permanently devastate local livelihoods and rural landscapes around Abingdon? Because that is something which is very real in some people's minds.
So, firstly, talking. Let's understand concerns, but also explain what the reservoir is and what it will be. Mm-hmm. We think it will be an enormously beneficial asset locally, and it's not an asset. It will become a place, a destination for people, but it'll also create jobs. It'd be good for the economy, and it's making sure that sort of we understand how we best design it to fit into that sort of place.
Yeah, and is there a sort of a view about how long that kind of project will take to settle down and become carbon neutral again? Because you're going to be moving a lot of earth, you're going to be disrupting a lot of stuff. How long does it take before it becomes biodiversity positive again?
So, all the design around the environment is critical to this scheme. We've got a 10% BNG target to hit. We will have a very low carbon approach. We can't remove the carbon because we are, as you say, moving a lot of earth around. Mm-hmm. But we are looking to make sure that we minimise what we bring in and take out, and that's absolutely critical. We're looking at the sort of modus for construction to make sure we bring carbon-free vehicles as we can and move things around in the best possible way. So everything we can do for carbon, we will do. And then in terms of BNG and getting sort of the right approach for the sort of wildlife and ecology, we are designing an awful lot of sort of the spaces that we need now. We've actually extended the area of the reservoir to provide more space for nature, and we will continue to work hard to make sure we establish those systems. Yeah, and
of course you've got 7 years of heavy engineering construction work, reducing the noise, the dust pollution, and that will you be using the railway to bring materials in and out quite a lot?
So a large sort of big loads of materials we need to bring in, whether that be sort of riprap and rock, and will come in through the railway and go out again occasionally if there's material to take away. Mm-hmm. So we don't clog up the local roads other than for local traffic.
Yeah, and of course you're going to have to buy a lot of land. That process of talking to local farmers, local landowners, presumably is ongoing through compulsory purchase orders. I mean, how do you ensure that they're fairly compensated? Who decides what fairly compensated is nowadays?
So we have special land agents. CPO is probably the last route we'll take. We tend to try and either put options in place or even buy where it's critical as well now. So everyone who is sort of on the plan of the reservoir has already been sort of spoken to. We continue those conversations. We'll negotiate where we can, and post DCO, we'll see where we've got to.
Yeah. So talking about what happens next, just to round us out. I mean, you've got as I say, DCO going in late 2026, and you've got operational status plan for 2040 with completion in 2043. It's a long timeline.
It is.
And in a rapidly changing climate and volatile political environment. I suppose, can the South East afford to wait nearly 2 decades for this water resource to come online?
Well, it's 14 years from now, isn't it, when this resource comes online? But we're doing an awful lot of work in between. We've already said that we are reducing leakage. We're looking at sort of more smart meters to reduce demand. Those things are critical. I think you'll see increased use of technology on our networks to manage flows and reduce leaks further. And those things will continue. At the same time, we are looking at other schemes. In London, we've got 3 other large infrastructure schemes that we are currently going through the design process of, and they will also benefit water, and some of those are due to come online before 2040. So there's a lot going on in our world, and it's an exciting time to come in, and something that sort of I relish at this stage in my career to be able to help manage.
Well, certainly, the contingency plans, if severe droughts hit, there's many other projects you've got, and of course, as we say this week, hosepipe bans are coming in place, which are another way of managing that. But I suppose once work begins in 2027, enabling works, I think, start in 2028, millions of pounds of public and investor money will be committed. At what point, in your mind, is a White Horse Reservoir, reaching that point of no return when it's definitely going to be a going project?
Look, from an emotional, personal point of view, we're on the track.
Right.
We have to get this done. There is sort of, this is the main piece of work we need for resilient water supplies in the South East. We will have to get through the DCO, and that will be sort of the official point, I would suspect, of when this scheme moves forward.
Right. Well, finally then, Nevil, what is your message to local residents around the Abingdon area, local campaigners who perhaps vow to fight you at every step of the way? What would you say to them?
So, we are listening, we understand, we're working with the community. This scheme is there to protect the environment and water supplies for the future for all. And that's what we are doing, and we will make sure it's a scheme that people are proud of. Yeah, and proud of it, I suppose, and is an asset that people can use into the future as well. I imagine. Absolutely. Well, Nevil, it's great to meet you and great to hear about your plans for the White Horse Reservoir. It's a huge undertaking and certainly something which, as an infrastructure project, is clearly one of those critical ones, and it's a very difficult one. So, look, thanks for joining me on the Infrastructure Podcast to spell it all out for us and explain. Thanks for joining me. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Well, thanks. But sadly, that's all we've got time for on the podcast right now. But there's more in the pipeline as we continue to probe the big issues facing the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Nevil, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.